Alright, Warcraft. Here's an idea. What if I look at this this GitHub here? As you can see on this this GitHub page here, Warsmash is getting Out-Warsmashed. So you can see here's Retera additions to the Warsmash code base in the last few years. You can see there's periodic spikes when actual work happened. And then if you look at the present, you can see this dramatic increase in additions to the code base coming from a different account. And that just shows you that Retera is getting Out-Warsmashed. You can see that here. Maybe, I don't know about deletions, but also in commits. You can see more frequent committing in the present day than Retera, who largely seems to have had trouble in 2022. That's kind of funny. I guess that's the year people started trying to claim it was taken down, even though it wasn't. So yeah, anyway, there you go. Getting Out-Warsmashed. So that just tells us that what we need to do about that is to do some Warsmash on the evening here. So here's an idea that as we just saw, Warsmash's greatest contributor might be approaching better Warsmashing than Retera. And Warsmash's greatest contributor has asked us a question, a challenge, if it were, to upgrade the code to support a new concept. And that new concept is invisibility. Okay, so how do you turn invisible on Warcraft? That's a pretty good question. Maybe I'll turn on some music while we figure out how to turn invisible. Okay, so the secret to turning invisible is multiple clients, where some clients render some things and others do not. And so I guess actually to that end, one thing we have here, yeah, over here, okay. So I'm actually on the wrong branch to sort of solve this problem, if you think about it. The problems that we want to solve to really make invisibility happen are going to be easier for us to do if we've got a clean state in the code. So let's commit everything we have locally. I was tinkering with some transport boarding thing. We probably don't need to worry about it. Made a concept of ranged abilities, why not? Okay. All this other stuff isn't really what we want. Alright. Code changes for this weekend. Some pretty cool music, right? Alright, well the code changes from this weekend are fix ribbons applying colored fog when additive. Maybe I should say color some fog to make the ribbon like turn solid, which you don't want. Fix versus loading screen to depend on player race. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna get that loaded up probably. And then apart from that, the other stuff that we would want to do. Basically, we have here some remotes. And we want to fetch the remote from the best contributor ever. Alright, great. And I think what we want to do is get their code branch. You know, if you think about what was this actually looking at? This is looking at their thing here, but I'm pretty sure that one's 5 months ago. This one's 3 weeks ago. Okay, they're 3 weeks ago commit here. We gotta see what we can do. So 3 weeks ago commit. There you go. Code management. That's when code goes wrong. That's when you have to manage it, probably. But cool. Yeah, they were doing a crash fix for invisibility, I guess. So we're going to try to pull that up and fix it. In particular, there's something I was going to try to add. So we got to get this branch. You know what that means? You're going to get the one over here with type the branch name, you know, and then we make a new branch based on that. You know, so that's my branch. You know, what do I want to call that? Just whatever I want. You know. Let's see if we can call it invisible fade. So the idea, as it was described to me, that apparently is harder to do in Warsmashed than it should be, is dealing with invisible fade. So basically, there's this idea that when something turns invisible, they should not instantly turn invisible. You know, that visually there is an invisibility effect, an appearance of transparency, and that appearance should change over time. Over time change. So that's what I gotta look into here. Let's see what I can do. This is taking a long time to start. I wonder if I need to merge in main branch. How much will that break? I guess I'm doing it while it's loading, so it's probably gonna break. Okay. Ooh. It's gonna break. Okay. Different authors working on different things at the same time. What did that just say? It's a behavior. Cool. So this thing said that they were changing kind of how it worked, which is probably smart. But I was trying to create move into range 4 as something totally separate, based on a copy of the same thing. Copying is bad when multiple people modify. So, basically copy whatever changed here. I guess I don't know. There's 2 of these. And you could imagine you know, what is the reason that there's 2 of these? That's a great question. Why do we have 2 of them? And so it's definitely going to conflate the copying kind of thing with the modifying the original. So this was a copy that became the newer version of that. And in particular, it was passing along itself in this other version. Apparently, it was deemed in the fork that the game simulation itself should be passed along. That's probably the change that was going to be meaningful here. So, I guess that becomes the question. I don't know if the music was too loud, but game itself passed along. So, game simulation passed as an argument in this function. And can I do the same? You know, can I do the same? That's the question. Can I pass the game function? I don't know if this mic is really good. It might be that it's not good. But anyway, passing things along as the game function. So basically in this function, I was passing an argument. Now I want to pass the argument for real. Or previously I wasn't. All right. Anyway, so you can see I'm rambling a little bit. Let's go for it. So this thing, some other, other contributor says we ought to have this argument. Modified version of my thing did not. Now all the rest of this, I don't actually know. Is it any different? It's probably the same. If I copy it from here into here, does this change? I mean, you could sort of picture like if I make some new thing here, that copy and this copy, and try to like sort of diff them. Even if I just visually make believe I'm doing a diff, what's the difference? Within range. Okay, we renamed to partner ability, but that's fine. Partner ability is a fine name. Get the paired ability. Target unit order, new order, target widget, handle ID. Using the smart order ID on the self with same queuing flags, and then pulling next order behavior. The formatting changed, but I think these are all identical, meaningful, or identical in meaning. And then place the stand animation. All the rest of that stuff's the same. Oh, they added a category. Okay, sure. So we can put the category into this new thing here. Probably. Yeah. Cool. So we got the category added. So that's a good thing to have. But what we don't have, realistically, is this change about passing along game. So that's kind of really what's really changing here. Is passing along game into this. Now, I don't particularly know why, but I'm sure there's a reason. Pass along game is an argument, and that should enable us to pass it into here for whatever they were doing with it, I guess. Function to skip in this method. Out-Warsmashed is not the best design software on earth. So it entices people changing it to make it weirder. I think the original reset method was probably based on a paradigm that's not even relevant. Basically, if you can imagine what would good design look like? If we put good design first, what would it look like? Okay, and that's pretty straightforward. Sometimes. So if I have Thunderbolt, it's Stormbolt. What does it do? I guess it's ability target spell base. Okay, sure. So when you begin it, what does it really do when you start doing this ability? Okay, if you were just going to be straightforward, we would say new behavior of thing, and you would do that new thing, and it would just make a thing. And I was trained by Java developers who never wanted to allocate memory. They believed that allocating memory slows down the computer. If you don't allocate memory, your computer runs better. So I had this idea to create it when the ability gets added to the unit, and then just constantly reuse it. And that's the reset method. And so the idea then is it's returning the same as that same thing, but other developers over time see that function and think, well, what is that? Why does that return itself? And so we create a situation where it's capable of not returning itself and instead trying to skip over itself as the different developers are trying to shut down something that's trying to happen. And you could sort of imagine that probably shouldn't have been that way. Like, I did it wrong, and that entices the people who come after me to also do it wrong, because it shouldn't be that way. Like, if we're going to go with this idea that the begin function isn't just new behavior of doing something, then logically it probably ought to return itself here. And if you don't want it to do something, so like, what is this? This is saying if a unit cannot move, excuse me, I just bumped the mic. If a unit cannot move, and then you try to do a move behavior, right? And so that in kind of the original design, if we're looking at ability move or something like that, conceptually you would want to say, if you're gonna be unable to move, we should just say can use movability and put in here, like, if, what is that, disabled movement, yeah, if unit get move behavior equals null, then like receiver movement is disabled or something. You might not even have that. Is that, oh yeah, okay, so this is where we have command string error keys dot caster movement is disabled or something like that, and you're like, oh, I can't do it, otherwise I pass back okay, and so you have kind of a feedback, which is optional. But then should be able to have something that skips over the feedback and doesn't use it. But the code has become gobbledygook from me working on it, and so now when other people try to add to it, it becomes I'm confusing them. Like, if you were going to look holistically at a code base, I'm the problem, right? Okay, so that's good, but it would be nice if that wasn't that way, but I'm not going to change that. I'm going to go with it because their changes are functional. Usually they're making it work. So we're going to make it work. So most of the gobbledygook of the merge collision in boarding and transport is that I realized boarding and transport is a stupid thing to have implemented. We should have moving into range for something else. I was thinking I wanted to use the same logic to move into range to a moonwell. So if you right-click a moonwell and it's going to heal you, you need to run into its healing range. I mean, it sounds really straightforward, but in the code it's gobbledygook, right? So this was something I was playing with earlier, to think to myself that moving into range for something should be a generic concept, and boarding a transport should just be an extension of that concept, that the only thing that's different is how it picks what pairing ability it's using to do that. So I have get partnered ability, which is just a function that just gets the transport ability off the other unit. So I mean, that was just, I was just trying to clean up a little bit, but now it made this gobbledygook because somebody else tried to change to pass in the game so that you could be able to intercept the new ability getting created, except it's not created, or sorry, new behavior getting created, but it's not created because it's recycled. Intercept the recycling kind of thing, concept-ish, and make it do nothing. And sure, maybe. So yeah, we wanna go in there and fix that. And in order to do it, we wanna be a lot like theirs, but instead of theirs, we're gonna be like a version of theirs that calls mine. That's gonna pass along the game in the same way. Other than that, it's not going to be any different. And all this other stuff they had that didn't change, except movement category, which I copied over, it's gone. So the end result, why this created a collision, is I basically deleted all of this text while they upgraded it. And now what we did is we applied their upgrade into the replica that I created that's supposed to be more generic. So that seems pretty good. Now, what I don't know is, if we're doing that, what are we doing in other places? What are other things that have an issue? So this one thinks that the two lines are different, and I don't see the difference. It's a test for you. Oh, wait, yes I do. It's the thing we just talked about, passing the game in. So we want theirs and not mine. Okay, great. That's straightforward. So then the other difference was in the worst file of all, War3 map viewer, which is, why is it called that? You know, we're not a map viewer, we're a game. But I based it on a map viewer and I added the game on top. And so the everything class, if you ever done bad programming is designed with something called the everything class. It's where you put all the code in one file because somebody's just writing it to just make it happen. That's what War3 map viewer is at this point. I don't know what they changed in all of this. I have really no idea, but if I was going to guess, I would probably guess that it would be that they would want more simulation render controller behaviors. So I moved that because I added the loading bar on my computer, and then essentially replicated that to achieve it. So now the thing that makes simulation render controller is down here. Again, this shouldn't have merge conflicts because I should have designed it better. It should be in some other, if not another file, at least a different place in the code that doesn't move when I do a change like this. Other than that, I really struggle to imagine that any of this other stuff is any different. These are all really generic things that have been here for a long time about loading MPQs and maps and other things, and I changed all of that in my copy to be inside of a class called MapLoader, which is used for the loading bar for now. There's a way to do that on libgdx that's better and more straightforward than what I'm doing, but I'm not making very good use of libgdx. A lot of times I'm just rolling my own components. So that's great. I think that fixes all the issues. We should go tell our little Git machine over here that we resolved our conflicts. It seems like a good idea to tell it that, unless anybody thinks there are still any other conflicts, but I doubt that there are. Now I'm also not sure. It thinks that this is why, you know, weird stuff. It thinks that I changed the movability. Didn't mean to do that. Why does it think I changed that? Yeah, it's like an auto fix. Maybe move was last saved on a different computer. I mean, it's kind of weird because I'm literally on the computer where the Warsmashed repo was originally created, so you would think that it would be the same because move is pretty old, but I don't care about that. Alright, great. So then I make a commit called merge. It's like telling the computer that we combine the code from his computer and my computer. Alright, great. Now that we did that, we can try playing it, which is kind of what I was going to try to do all along. So that's cool. I get some good music. Look at that. Alright. Some people can't even tell it's not Warcraft. I can't believe it's not butter. Alright. I like to play Northern Storm. It's a pretty good melee map. This is a melee map I drew years ago when I was having fun. It was a long time ago, but it was a good time. Okay, so if we turn this on, what I'm interested in right now, primarily, is going to be like Windwalk. So, Windwalk makes you invisible. Invisible doesn't exist on my version of Warsmash, but this contributor's version of Warsmash does have invisible. So that's kind of fun, you know, they changed the code and they added invisible because I didn't originally have it. So let's see what we can do with that. But they said they needed a fade timer. That's where I'm going to see if I can add a fade timer. Cool, great. Okay, so, oh, that's fun. Apparently the buttons are broken. I don't know why the buttons are broken. Oh, I do know why the buttons are broken, actually. Okay, that's fair. So the buttons are broken because I was playing the 9-item inventory version, and that's actually a bluff I use in YouTube videos. It doesn't actually work. It only works on the Night Elf race. All the other races, it's totally offset the wrong way. So we can't do that. Oh, it's playing the game music. Why are we playing the game music? Then I can't have my great music. I was playing my own music, and now we have game music. Alright. maybe that's how it's going to be. And we'll just have game music. So you can see I animated the loading bar, but there's still ways to go. Okay, look at that, we got orc music. Alright, alright. So now you can see the UI is better. The Night Elf version for YouTube video gimmicks is not enabled. So we have the actual game, pretty much. Although there's something really broken, if you look at this, just really broken footprints. They're not correct. They are jumping in and out. Just like some really loud orc music, so I tried to turn it down. Alright, mostly we just want to get a Blade Master and have him turn invisible. That's mostly what it's all about. Can this load yet? No. Alright, and burrows don't work. That's pretty dumb. I gotta fix burrows. Who's managing this project? Alright, well, that's my fault. I didn't fix burrows. You know what I did? I fixed the lighting on this building so it would light up, but I didn't make burrows work. So that's kind of dumb. Alright, so Warsmash's greatest contributor ever has made it that if I ask my Blade Master to turn invisible, he turns invisible. But as you can see, what he does not do is he does not fade from visible to invisible. He simply jumps. So this is kind of a preliminary implementation by the contributor, and it is not, you can see it stops them from attacking me, so that's pretty cool. Apparently it doesn't stop me from attacking them. I don't remember if it does that on Warcraft. I kind of thought maybe it would like stop auto attacks, but you know, probably not. I don't know if I care about that though. Having Windwalk is cool, but we gotta make it fade. How do we make it fade? So it's a good question. It didn't solve. So it seemed like if you were going to make it fade, the problem becomes that they were trying to use game behaviors to set art, and the game behaviors are notoriously not the art. So basically, Warsmash is trying to actually run a synchronized slow version of the game that only has 20 turns per second. You can see them with the human eye. And that's actually how units move and how abilities interoperate currently. And the only thing that actually interpolates between that are the visuals. So really the problem is that we need to define like a fade timer on our units or something, and then like interpolate along that in some way. I guess, so is there like set invisibility? Okay, so invisibleness is here. Like who is touching this? Does something actually change this? Invisible levels. Okay, so depending on its buffs, when we update unit state, which is apparently a thing that we do, which we apparently do at some point in time, probably here. Well, that seems wrong. Invisible state updates. So invisibility state updates are happening on buffs getting added and removed. Okay. And then on things that adjust the state. I guess that makes sense. Okay. Cool. So there's like unit state it's adjusting. But yeah, what we don't have is a fade timer on our units, which is defining when they're fading, which I guess is kind of an interesting problem that your unit you think is like invisible or not, and you could think about, does he become invisible instantly? And then you think about, no, we don't want that. We want him to become invisible over time. And how do you do that? Because, so like right now, if something wants to adjust the unit states, for example, invisibility, this is apparently something that is probably adjusted. Yeah, basically you can add some kind of buff-like thing, apparently, and the buff-like thing makes him turn invisible. So okay, so then you have a buff like stun buff, and it makes him invisible, I guess. And so I don't know. I'm actually curious. Stun buff, and it makes him invisible. Sorry, now I'm saying that wrong. I'm not stun buff. Stun buff is a kind of state mod, but obviously the invisible buff makes him invisible. So the interesting question for me really is, if we have this invisible buff and you add it, what do you do about fading? Because you don't really want to instantly translate the invisibleness, but the presence of this state mod buff idea, I mean, I guess I sort of think of it as probably what Blizzard did. I do a lot of probablys because I don't know. Probably what Blizzard would have done would be that you would fade something, and when the fade finishes, you apply the invisible. And I would think that the fade would be like something that's happening in the unit. And it seemed when we were looking at this before that there's a really interesting case that was shown to me while we were discussing the problem. The idea was, if you have a unit and your unit is permanently invisible, it has permanent invisibility with a 30-second delay, and then if you attack, and then you have this invisibility fade timer that starts for 30 seconds, you could interrupt it, and then the visuals would be fading again until the unit was truly invisible. But what that did not do, interestingly, it was capable of making the unit translucent, but it did not, how do I say this? It was not letting you stack them, and it seemed to be combining shadow meld with this invisibility could cause your unit to not shadow meld because they already had a timer running from something else, like from permanent invisibility, which is an interesting kind of idea. So I guess if we think about, I don't know, I had some map open, and maybe I can close that and then try to get to maybe a better version of the editor that would let me sort of illustrate what I'm talking about. But it seemed to be the case that okay, so let's say I have a map where I have Huntress, and my Huntress has APIV, you know what I'm talking about, APIV over here, and her APIV has these numbers set to like 30 seconds or whatever. What that means is that she has not what you think, and the Huntress can, isn't there like a hotkey select in tool palette, although Apparently it's not as easy to get to as it should be. Cool, okay. So the thinking would be that hypothetically, you have this unit, it's invisible,
Make it fast.
and then we make it nighttime. Cool. So let's say it's nighttime, so you have shadow meld available.
I shall not fear.
Now the unit is... That's a really fast fade time. Okay, so it must have been... I was forgetting which of the times was the fade time, but realistically, I guess... yeah, I guess it's the normal one. That makes sense. I pasted over the hero one. Somehow I thought I was on the normal one, but I wasn't. I was on the hero one that made it not work. So here we go. Cool. Okay. So you know now we're running 2009 Blizzard version or whatever.
I shall not fear.
So she has this like really slow invisibility happening, and if we mash shadow meld, it doesn't make her more invisible. It doesn't help. And so I think the idea there is that units don't have two invisible timers. You know, like if I put a some kind of kobold null thing, let's say there's a null over here who's hostile to me or something like that. Null. Okay, we'll put some nulls around. Basically, so I can just get attacked if I need to get attacked. These might be too close to my base, so let's put them further out. Okay, great. So I have a couple nulls around, you know, and the idea is that shadow meld literally does not work during this time, which is it's interesting. You know, it's not really what you'd expect, but so here's the huntress, and now she's over here. She attacks this building. She becomes visible. And then she runs over to this null, and you think like, okay, so it's a huntress, and it's a null. I attack the null, and I use shadow meld, and it doesn't matter. He just keeps attacking me while I'm shadow melded. And this is the original Blizzard game, right? I mean, this is not Out-Warsmashed. So then you think, well, why is that? He's just whacking her and whacking her. It's not working. There you go. So she finally turned invisible. So then you think, well, why did that happen? And that happened because there's like one fade timer for everything. And that fade timer is shared between invisibles. You're just like, are you invisible? Oh, well, not really because of your fade timer. So that's kind of an interesting one. And we probably want to be able to replicate that on Out-Warsmashed. So I don't actually know off the top of my head. If I save this as like Huntress test, I actually also, I'm a little bit curious. I don't recall in this branch that this contributor made if we have something else that is like a permanently invisible unit, like a comma. What kind of abilities does a comma have on this fork that I'm on, this branch? How much of Out-Warsmashed is working? I don't remember. So let's find that out. That sounds fun. Let's see. Yeah, let's call this Huntress test. Okay, and then see if we can just run that. And maybe with my recent changes, we'll actually get a loading bar, which is kind of fun. It's not a good loading bar. Nope, apparently we couldn't find the map, which is, I don't know why that is. I called it Huntress Test. That's a pretty straightforward name. You would think that would just work. I don't know why that doesn't just work. Load file Huntress Test. And it says, nope, 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 nope. We don't have that. That probably means that my recent changes in map loading broke stuff. Because there wasn't like an error, it just didn't do anything. Like it's like it failed to like load or something. I don't know. Sorry. Okay, internal load map. getting called to load a map, getting called from update, getting called from begin game information. Right. So this was very broken. This thing here should not be setting load started equals true. I was looking at that yesterday morning and I thought there was some duplicated code. It was gone wrong. I tried to make it less gone wrong and I messed it up. Now look at that. Now loading did start. Okay, so that's good. Now we got a loading bar even. It used to be the loading bar was never captured in the video. I don't know, maybe you guys get to see the loading bar in the video now if buffering actually works between the video recording software. Cool. Okay, so in this branch, this is the user fork from Warsmash's best contributor. Apparently, not only do we have shadow meld, we have a comma as invisibility, I guess. Sure, why not? That's amazing. All right. Open source is amazing. So he actually turns invisible when he attacks, and then he turns visible, excuse me, when he attacks, and then turns invisible again when he runs away. So that's cool. Basically, the description I was given is that the only thing missing is a timer for the fading. You can see this thing's chasing me, and then watch me just like turn invisible. Like, oh, nope, no you don't. Warsmash doesn't have guard positions, so you can see the null doesn't go back to where he was like sleeping previously. But I mean, that's kind of on me. You know, I think that adding guard positions probably wouldn't really be that hard. Okay, cool. So that's pretty neat. But what about these huntresses? So do they actually, I'm curious if they have this like 30-second timer that I put in the editor. Oh yeah, so it's actually functionally really similar. So it's literally like functionally the same. It's just like messed up in terms of it's not fading slowly visually. Okay. It's pretty legit, really. Because, you know, we want to have like shadow meld. Now I'm also not sure, I don't seem to have the cheat code to make it nighttime. I don't suppose does contributor make it that if I go into commas inventory and give him a whole bunch of moonstones that, what are the odds? I thought I saw something about that in the commits, that maybe I can just give him a whole bunch of moonstones. And it's kind of like the same as the cheat code, you know? It'll help me test. Okay, cool. If that actually works, that's awesome. It's awesome. Open source is awesome. Imagine that somebody else could just decide to upgrade. Oh, okay, that ran the Blizzard code, so that's not going to tell us anything. We got to run out of the code editor on the Warsmash code. That's the real way to do it. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, moonstones. Look at that. Oh, it even does, it does the purple. It does the purple. All right, thank you, Glacier. Glacislander, the contributor has made this thing turn purple. So you can shadow meld. She has permanent invisibility, so that's why she's staying invisible, but I'm sure that if you had an actual Night Elf unit, the shadow meld would actually sort of work more like how you expect. So that's really cool. That is really, really cool. Okay, so we just, basically, the whole point, what I was told, is that they wanted to have a fade, and I should help them do that. And they're right, because their code is awesome, and I should help them have a fade. So we got to think about how does invisible work. So if you look at an ability that I wrote in Warsmash, you know, I mean, there was a video I made one time where that was like ability cluster rockets or whatever. You look at an ability that I made. What I did is I just made Java classes. So this is bad code. It's like Warcraft 3, where users can't use this. Like if you already have Warsmash downloaded on your computer and you don't feel like recompiling all of Warsmash itself, then you can't change what cluster rockets does. And that's stupid. So Warsmash's greatest contributor, notably this was not me, had the idea that instead there should be an ability behaviors folder with a bunch of JSONs, and you can just go in JSON and define what things do. It's pretty nice. It's kind of like, I mean, it's similar to having you know, your trigger editor almost for like hack abilities. You know, like or people who mod Warcraft 3 are just hacking. They're not really adding things in a way that was meant to be. This is like, okay, we're going to add what our abilities do in a way that was made with intention. It was meant to be. And so you look at your Night Elf unit actives, I would imagine you're going to see shadow meld in here. apparently just try to open some Visual Studio bollocks. I don't want to open. You know, who does that to people? Only Microsoft would make it that double-clicking a JSON file tries to open something with a load bar that puts your real-life name on the screen and has to authenticate who you are in order to edit a JSON file. Okay, and that is a sick mistreatment of human beings. And eventually, I am going to leave Windows for Linux, but at this exact moment, we're still getting there. So I'm going to edit a JSON file with a text editor because I'm a human being and I want rights. And so this is a text editor, and this is Night Elf unit active, as you can see. But one of the unit actives here, I think, is probably the one that's going to be hide or perhaps shadow meld. Never mind, I'm wrong. It's probably called ambush. Great. Third try is, third try's the charm. Cool. So it's ambush over here. So this one is the implementation that this contributor for Warsmashed has created, which is awesome, which basically enables or disables the ability based on a time of day range, and then gives that ability to function that when you actually would like cast it, you're going to have that's going to make you invisible, probably. How does this work? So this is on disable ability, but I imagine there are also was it on add disable abilities, on begin casting, begin channeling. I'm still learning this format. I didn't write this, but it's kind of fun. So you can see that they have the time of day check that can potentially enable the ability. And there's a time of day event that can potentially enable the ability and toggle if it's on or off. But what we don't exactly have here, unique time of day events. I was trying to see if I could find the on begin casting. There's begin channeling. There's begin channeling. Tell us what it does. I'm not sure. Because I'm sort of thinking here, like somewhere it probably references like something about like invisible, and maybe invisible. I don't know, maybe not. Huh. Well. Huh. What am I overlooking here? I guess the trick to really handling ambush is the ambush is a fairly hard-coded thing. So I actually don't know this. I don't know if this person finished coding ambush. I don't see the function, and it doesn't mean it's not there, that would allow. I'm just going to put some Night Elf, Night Elf units for fun that have like shadow meld. I don't know if Warsmashed in this branch supports shadow meld or not. It clearly supports a comma style shadow meld, which is an ability that just makes you stand still and not do anything. But you would think there would also be a trigger. There probably was. I think I was just overlooking it. It was probably maybe somebody watching this like sees it and I don't. Something right in front of my face that basically is saying if the unit stands still for a period of time that they become visible. But I can appreciate that Warsmashed doesn't make that easy to implement. So we make it nighttime. Do these guys really turn invisible? No, they don't. Okay, so that's consistent with what we were just reading. That makes sense to me. You would see if you were on Blizzard Entertainment's code, that would make these units turn invisible. And on Warsmashed, all it's doing is running that JSON file, which it doesn't have invisible in there. These guys are all invisible because they have the permanent visibility ability. So that's an interesting bunch of anecdotes. But what it tells us is, you can see invisibility is a struggle to implement in Warsmashed, but permanent invisibility seems to be working. So that's probably actually the one I should be reading, which I guess would be in general passives.
Now it's going to try to open Visual Studio again because Microsoft are just a bunch of scumbags. But if we could just maybe set my default JSON to a text editor at some point, that would be really nice. So I'm going to get out of my face, Microsoft. What do I need to do? Like edit the video and cut out the part with my name so that it doesn't. So Microsoft wants to advertise, oh, we know who you are. Here's your real name. I don't need to do that, Microsoft. Okay, no one else on Earth has to pay money to edit a JSON file, Microsoft. That's only you. All right, so now I'm on Night Elf unit actives. I really should like uninstall whatever that. I'm gonna move to Linux, but Night Elf unit actives over here. So that's the wrong file. I was just opening the wrong file. I was getting frustrated. General passives, what we're trying to find, right? So I started off this movie with APIV, right? So APIV is a great ability. The APIV actually makes sense. It's basically that you're frequently adding a passive buff, and this is the state mod buff idea. And it says the value here is invisible buff. So I guess there's kind of two ways to do this. One would be that the adding of that invisible buff could be based on a timer, and the timer could be based on this code that we see here. But instead, I am theorizing that the unit only has one invisible timer in Blizzard's code. And so we would probably want to change the JSON, that instead of each JSON having their own timer, they invoke the Blizzard timer. Now, it's also been said to me by this contributor that it would probably be wise to have a distinction between things that emulate Blizzard and things that emulate the smartest thing you can think of, because the two so frequently diverge. And I think that's fairly respectable. But if my focus at the moment is emulating Blizzard, maybe I'll try today the route of just one timer for the entire unit that can be running or not. And if something tries to run it that wasn't already, then it would simply fail, and you would keep doing the one you were already doing, which seemed to be the behavior as I understood it to be. I could be wrong about that, but it seemed reasonable. And I think it also helps with other stuff. So in terms of adding state mod buffs, conceptually, one of the state mod buffs is invisibility, I think. Yeah, invisible. Now, I'm not quite sure what this value is for, and I imagine that maybe it's just sort of, it's like custom value or something, probably. Snared, if the snared is non-zero, if you're non-zero snare, basically it's yes or no, I guess. What is it? It's mostly just getting used as non-zero over here. Yeah, I don't know. There might be somewhere that it's used for something other than non-zero, but what I'm seeing here is it's just frequently used for booleans. Okay, so mostly there's this concept of state mod buff that's invisible, and I'm learning it as I'm talking, because this is code written by this contributor that I myself didn't write. But we have this idea of turning invisible with a state mod buff. And so if you can turn invisible with a state mod buff, which seems great, you also want to be able to turn invisible with a state mod buff on a timer. So when we have add state mod buff over here, that's like, oh, well, now you can turn invisible if you want. I'm basically theorizing that you would probably want there to be another function that would just sort of be like a fade to invisible timer idea. And I guess one of the challenges there is that invisibility timer, there's also coming back from invisible, and maybe sometimes that's a timer, but most of the time it would be like one timer. It's like the invisible timer. That's probably what I'm going to do for now. It's just the one direction turning invisible. Maybe later we'll do fading back in, which does happen, but I think, doesn't that happen? It seemed like it happened in the past. I'm just going to start with fading to invisible. So maybe start invisibility timer. We could come up with a better name for this later on, but that's what I'm calling it right now. So the idea is after the timer, you turn invisible. And I guess that's flawed in a lot of ways, because you could imagine, what if you start an invisibility timer and then before it's over you lose the invisible? I mean, it seems to me that that could have a bunch of edge cases, and I don't know, like, did Blizzard handle those back in the day? Probably. They seem to be on top of their stuff a lot of times. So if I go in here, I make a trigger, and I basically say, alright, I'm clicking my 4K screen up here. Alright, if I make trigger and I say, when I skip a cinematic, just bunch the escape key, can I remove my new ability from a particular unit? We'll just pick that one in the center. Sorry, I wanted to remove ability. Yeah, that one in the center. Okay, and the ability to remove is going to be this unit ability that it's custom. It's the only custom ability in the map. So my question is basically, if I remove the ability while the fade timer is running, are we smart enough to turn it off? And we have to be. Surely it's that smart, which is interesting, you know. It points out that I could quite possibly be wrong about my understanding of what's happening.
Absolutely.
But,
I shall not fear. My
okay, so basically, if she...
How may I aid you?
as the goddess wills.
Is she still fading? Like, you would think not. Like, once I hit the escape key, that she's not going to fade anymore. And she would just stay visible forever. Which is interesting. So maybe I'm wrong. What if I'm wrong? What if the idea-ish of having a timer, and this is just ish, what if the idea is actually that start invisibility timer should, it has a duration in seconds, basically. That's how long it's going to run. And I was thinking in my head that you would want to say, well, and the unit is in the process of turning invisible. But maybe we can leave that to be handled by the state. So there's this interesting idea that the state mod buffs get applied, and then after they're applied, we recompute the unit state. So then I start to think, can I simply say that the unit state of invisible does not apply until the timer is updated, in some sense? That if the timer is still running, we're stalling the updating of invisible, which is a little bit wonk, but it might work. So basically, if I start an invisibility timer, similar to how the unit has invis levels, I'm just for now going to say that every unit has a invisibility timer. And I guess then you get back to timer is an abstract class. And that means that invisibility timer should be defined as a class. So I'm going to make a class called timer fade, and this is just the unit's fade timer. Maybe timer unit fade. That's a timer unit fade. So it's a C timer, you know. But what does it do differently? How does it change? My thought process would be almost nothing. All we have to implement is what it does when it fires. And so the idea is, here's a timer that when it fires, we're gonna update the unit, and it's almost like nothing happens. I'm going to start with the idea that nothing happens, that we're literally just stalling the time before computing unit state. Oh, that means something should happen actually. So recompute, what, compute unit state? Oh, yeah, okay. So is it non-static? Basically, it's non-static, and then I can just say compute unit state. And the state is invisible. Compute the invisible state. State mod buff type invisible. So that would be the idea. So basically, we recompute our invisibleness when we finish. And so this idea of recomputing our invisibleness when the timer finishes, it's kind of dumb. There's probably some edge case where this is going to be a problem. But it does mean that nuking the timer when we remove invisibility should cause us to instantly become visible, I think, which is interesting. So I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit. I'm gonna method refactor the idea of invisibility levels, and I'm gonna make compute invisibility levels as like first state mods, as this idea that you could look at what that is independently from the current invis levels value, which is, again, it's a little bit weird, but it's going to mean that we can look at should the unit be invisible. So there's an existing system in place that this other person was writing, and that system jumps between invisible and not invisible. But when it's running a timer to delay applying invisibility, it's like, I want a way to say, well, really there's one true timer in the unit before I check again. And so that timer should know which direction I'm going. And I was thinking, and maybe I'm making this all more complicated than it should be. So then you get back to, should I instead say that they tell me not do this? Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Instead of this, if state mod buffs are instantaneous and the instantaneous state mod buffs, maybe that's more logical. Is it smarter to say that invisibility fade timer will add state mod buff, like new state mod buff. Oh, okay, so here's the other thing. Realistically then, let's see, timer unit fade, I guess, and you say state mod buff. State mod buff, right? So it's like, okay, so when I create one of these timers, we're going to have a state mod buff that's the buff that we're delaying. Maybe that makes sense. That's pretty logical. I'm guessing that the invisible action literally calls compute unit state of the buff type. Right, so, because, okay, that's not the one getting used. Surely this is the one getting used. Yeah, we add it and recompute it. And so it's like at some point, I'm gonna, instead of this action, I'm going to be delaying this action. Which is interesting. It would actually be probably smarter if I made a general case system for this, but we need the fade timer to be able to project the translucency of the unit, which is really part of the problem being solved here. So we'll get back to that. All right. Unit fade timer. It's basically like fade timer. And the other thought that I had was that every unit would have one fade timer, and maybe that's stupid because we're breaking the concept that you would have multiple invisible buffs, which is, maybe that's a more logical concept. You know, it's an interesting question. Is invisibility an on-off, or is invisibility a buff count? Or, as we have here, is invisibility a number of buffs that can modify a level count? But this, don't fool ourselves. Invisibility levels in Warcraft 3, you know, if you're a Blizzard and you're looking at the source code of Warcraft 3, there's an integer for invisibility on the unit, but that integer is not the integer we see here. The integer on Warcraft 3's source code, I think, is it's an integer count of like how many things would have made the unit invisible. I'm basing this on the idea that a bunch of other things work this way, and so I could be wrong, but invulnerability works that way, I think. Pausing a unit works that way. So there's a bunch of functions that when they when you repetitively set a flag to on rather than setting a flag to on, it actually increments a numerical value. And what that means is that it's like you're stacking its onness, and so then when you decrement, we're turning it back off. That's essentially what the state mod buffs are already doing. So we get back to that, but when I think about it like Warcraft 3, I have a tendency to almost think of invisibility levels here as being that count of how many invisibility buffs I have. And I believe it's not. I think that the invisibility levels is actually one unit can be more invisible than another unit. This was an interesting idea that the contributor who wrote this code was telling me, that by my understanding of what's currently in this code, for example, a burrowed unit might be less invisible than a shade if you were going to implement something like burrow detection flyers that exists on Frozen Throne but doesn't function. And so it was trying to be open-ended, that you can have a unit that can be seen by some invisibilities and not by some true sights and not others. It's a concept that it appears in the world editor as though it would exist, but it doesn't. Why not make it exist on Warsmashed? Seems like fun. I can appreciate that, but I think it's interesting to remember that invisibility levels, I think, is involved in how invisible something is, and not in the repeated setting of the invisibility flag in the way that the original Warcraft 3 game would have probably just had integers for various states that are going up and down, which is essentially what looked like state mod buffs are, although they might be using more memory. So I don't know if that matters. It probably doesn't matter, but my thought process would be, if we have this fade timer running, does it add a state mod buff when it finishes? And I think so, but it's a little unfortunate to think that maybe that doesn't work well if you have multiple invisible abilities. Is there a case where that makes one of them not function because it's essentially not adding its state mod? I guess maybe not. If you only have one kind of invisibility, then this sort of Blizzard-esque hack idea, probably, of just one fade timer for the entire unit, maybe becomes more reasonable. So that's where I think, for the time being right now, I'm going to continue with the sort of dumb idea, but we might find that another contributor in the future does invisibility fades better once they've seen what I'm doing and get their own ideas. Really, the part that this contributor was even asking me about to begin with is, what would I do for an interpolation visually in the render system that would be independent of the gameplay logic, which is throttled to 220 updates per second, which you do not want visually. You want your unit to do a clean fade. If I have 144 FPS monitor, I want to have 144 changes in the visibility level of the unit. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to try to do that. And so I'm going to do this simple example, and later someone else is going to realize that it's dumb. But let's do the simple example. So to that end, I think start invisibility timer. I'm thinking that I'll do that. Now, this does actually make me wonder, in a world where passive abilities like invisibility already create a timer, and they already set it, should I simply have set fade timer on the unit, and I just set their fade timer to this thing, and then check? I mean, that would be their idea, is to implement what I'm describing, not in the engine itself, but in userland. And I think that if the JSON were instead some scripting language, which it is trying to be and functionally is, but if I could sit and write it more quickly, I probably would. And right now I'm feeling lazy. So I'm going to do the lazy thing. And later, it would probably be smarter not to do that. And just have set fade timer and get fade timer, and then have your userland be like, if get fade timer is not null, then don't set it, but otherwise set it up. I'm just gonna make a function start invisibility timer, because I think that makes sense. And it seems like there was already a state mod buff, so we're gonna assume that the outside can give us a state mod buff. I think that makes sense. And this is going to say fade timer. So I was trying to set fade timer up as, no, yeah, okay, we're good. Fade timer equals new invisibility fade timer of that state mode buff. And then fade timer does not repeat. I wonder, do we have other parameters over here? What was their timer doing? Start timer, Boolean false. Probably is doesn't repeat. Timeout is ability duration. I actually don't know. I have some questions about this. So if I create a timer, now I'm becoming increasingly curious about what I'm looking at. It says that it adds a buff as last created buff when the timer finishes. What is the scope of last created buff? You know, is that scoped on the thing? You would think it would have to be. It's kind of weird. You know, the Blizzard.j last created goober thingies are they're global, which, you know, that works for trigger editor, but for this thing, I don't know. You know, it's pretty nice. I mean, you can set a variable, and I'm not sure if this is creating a timer. So it's the type of the buff is the last created buff. So it's like the type of the buff is typed on this object. I'm just gonna assume that was done right with the sort of last created, that like each thing has its own last created, which is probably memory guzzling, but you know, the world is memory guzzling these days. That doesn't really matter. So sure, we're gonna add a buff, and what I'm gonna try to solve is just gonna be the timer. I think that seems more logical. So if I go back to unit, I can make a timer that adds a state mod buff, does not repeat, and is on the delay. And I don't really know when I look at this if this is yeah, if timer is active. Oh, this is starting to make a lot more sense. Okay, if the timer is active, nothing, otherwise we remove the buff, and then potentially do stuff with the buff. I don't know what dat k buff is. I'm gonna have to look this stuff up. But yeah, basically you can add or remove the buff, and it sort of makes sense. It would do that, and it could potentially remove the buff. But there's this timer before it actually, timer and then adds the buff. So if it creates a timer and the timer is not running, it would make sense that there would be actions, which I guess is when you attack or cast a spell, then you remove the buff and start the timer. So that's starting to make way more sense. Yeah. So this thing that's starting the timer right here, this is probably the thing that we would want to replace, except, you know, it's weird because you don't really want to replace much of it. It's already the right idea. I'm almost making it more broken. But in my more broken version, the timer would be the fade timer. The more I think about that, the more it seems like adding this clunkiness that I was going to do is, maybe it is stupid. Maybe it's outside the scope. So instead of the fade timer being a timer unit fade of this gobbledygook I was sort of adding, suppose that we scrap that and we have a new idea, which is that there's already a timer that's being created and it's already working quite well. And all we really need to do is set fade timer with the timer that is the which timer. You know, it's like what timer is the new fade timer. And, you know, this will mean that Warsmash won't yet be like Warcraft 3, but it will mean that units will fade. So this is going to be a fun start. Because I was thinking, I was doing too much. I was going to reinvent what we were just looking at in JSON, reinvent it in the code here, and then try to fire off of that to make a unit fade in or out. So waste of time. Instead, I should have it, we use what's already there, and then I'm just going to update the unit based off of what's already there. See, I'm learning as I go based on this user code we're looking at. So instead of wasting time, we use what's already there. We have a set fade timer function. And what that means is we can go to add state mod buff. We can look at how add state mod buff is implemented. In particular, this idea that there is a add state mod buff unit state thing. And basically, you know, this would probably be recategorized later to a better category, but it would be essentially this ability builder JSON action that is the set unit fade timer. The concept being, we tell this unit, here is a timer that is more important than your other timers, things that are going on. That timer is your fading of invisibility. And it would probably later on be nice if I added a version of this that knew whether it was fading in or out. But maybe for starters I don't do that. Suppose that for starters I just make something that just does that. So it's basically it's gonna be really, really similar to what was already there, but pretty much it's a unit timer or unit callback and a timer callback. Yeah. So it has a target unit and it has a timer. And so pretty much we're just gonna timer callback. I don't know how much that requires. Timer callback. I guess this needs to be ctimer, the timer. I don't know what does a timer callback require, but let's find out. Never mind, that looks great. Okay, so this gives us timer. Okay, so it gives us a timer, or gives us a unit. And all I'm doing is saying target.setFadeTimer, the timer. Oh, this is going really well. Okay, so I do that, and then I have state mod buff. And then when we register things that you can do in JSON, add state mod buff, I'm gonna have another one that is set fade timer. Maybe it should be set unit fade timer. This is a little redundant, but I'm gonna go with it for now. Set unit fade timer. Cool. Now this is my auto formatter is running, which is gonna be horrible for merge collision stuff. Probably I should fix that later, but I told it not to run and now it's lagging my computer. That's just stupid. You know, sometimes there's like two kinds of people in the world. Those who upgrade things to function and those who upgrade things to function less. Those are the two kinds of software developers in the world. Alright, but now we have set unit fade timer, and I should literally be able to set unit fade timer in here. So we have like start timer and passives, and that's false, but this has start timer, get last created timer. I'm going to put another JSON action here that is after we start the timer. When we do this, we are going to also set unit fade timer, and the target unit is going to be it looks like I need to do one of these. JSON loves commas. This one's going to be casting units, and then the timer we're going to set is the last created timer. So this is a little bit jank, but I think it ought to work. It sets the unit fade timer, and so what this essentially does, in a really sort of roundabout way, is it gives me a hack that lets me ask from the outside, what is the unit's fade timer? And we're assuming they only really have one that's going to be used for visual interpolation, which is kind of, it's a hack, you know, but set unit fade timer, which is going to mean now I can go to render unit where the magic happens. So render unit, unlike C unit or whatever, is calling update animations. It's like the sort of update loop of the visuals. And this is something that updates, you know, if you have 144 hertz monitor, we update 144 times. It doesn't matter. It's just, you know, your local computer does whatever you want. So I'm assuming that at some point, these visibility functions, when they add a buff, like invisible, and I guess all of this stuff refers frequently to last created buff, and so we probably want to think about where does it create a buff? You know, it creates a state mod buff for invisible, but does it create like a buff that handles like the, yeah, so like it has invis buff, create passive buff, the buff with an alias, the real kind of buff. Okay, and this is the thing, it does set unit alpha, and that's where I'm wondering, should we not do that? Because setting unit alpha on invisibility is assuming that the abilities are going to like bring it in and out. I mean, I was playing one of these earlier. I don't know if this is still true. It's probably not. But I've tested a version of this where a Blade Master could just cast, what do you call it? He could cast Windwalk after the cooldown ended, but before the ability's effect ended, Windwalk twice, and then make himself double invisible. And then when it wore off, and so it would do 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and you'd become like, you know, this sort of inverse exponential curve of like getting more invisibleness, and it just, why are we doing any of that is sort of what I would think. So I would come at it from the perspective that if we look at things like this, you know, if I say, okay, I'm setting unit alpha, where am I doing that? And I look at, you know, so I guess there's two passives right now that are setting unit alphas. I don't know what Windwalk is doing, because apparently I would have kind of expected Windwalk was doing the same thing. No, Microsoft, no, get out of my face, Microsoft, what are you doing? Microsoft sucks. All right, so, you know, you shouldn't have to have a loading bar to show a JSON file in the text editor. If you do that, you're doing it wrong, you know. All right, so I have unit alphas, and I'm actually quite interested in this idea that only shows up in passives, because I don't understand what Windwalk is doing at that point. Okay, actually, here's Windwalk. So, does Windwalk touch alpha? Yes, it multiplies the unit alpha. Okay, this is exactly what I was describing. And then you multiply and you multiply and you multiply and you multiply and you get more and more invisible. And meanwhile, this thing is setting the invisible unit state mod buff. So I'm basically just saying that in general passives, like set unit alpha, and we're setting it to 0.5 and we're setting it to 1, I'm just going to delete the whole thing, okay? Because of the idea that we don't need to do that. We're going to let that game engine handle whether transparent units fade halfway. Okay, and that's going to be true of invisible, and it's going to be true of Windwalk. Okay, and so alpha, everything that's touching alpha over here, multiply unit alpha, I'm just going to delete it. We just don't even need to do it. It's going to be based on the invisible state of the unit, which is a thing that we have, you know, divide unit alpha. I'm just not even going to do it. Divide unit alpha, I'm just going to delete that. You know, your invisible unit doesn't need to become more invisible. You know, it's just like one of those, the rules of simplicity or whatever, keeping code simple. Hopefully I didn't just break the JSON file, but I guess if I did, well, no, because it'll fail to parse. What is this thing? Ghost. Look at that. Ghost. The same ability, same problem. Okay. So divide unit alpha. I don't think we care about that either. All right. So I think I've deleted all the alpha from work abilities, and I think I've deleted all of it from general passive abilities. And I think what I was seeing is that Night Elf Hide doesn't actually work yet. So okay, Cool. So now we have the alphas deleted. So nobody's manipulating alpha anymore in any of these abilities. I am going to be the boss of alpha, and what I'm going to say with alpha is that basically when a render unit is invisible, there we go, render unit. So back to render unit. I didn't forget where it was open at, but you know, render unit already does a bunch of crap in update animations, and quite honestly, it's quite surprising that this stuff doesn't lag computers. You know, we're getting to a point where the computers are so fast you can just write down whatever you're thinking and it just works most of the time, unless if you're not being algorithmically smart about which algorithm you choose. But I mean, this is like doing a ton of just goober math of, you know, what's your pitch and roll on your unit every time it spins. And so that's why I think to myself, if I also say that the alpha of the unit is going to float up and down, I think that's probably fine. So essentially, C unit needs to be not only get fade timer, but get invis levels. Okay, and so getting back to this idea that invis levels is just, if it's non-zero, your unit's going to be invisible. It'd be my understanding. If it is 0, your unit is visible. And I'm guessing that's what we see in is visible. Yes, here you go, right? If invis levels is greater than 0, and then some other stuff about being detected. So invis levels, when it is greater than 0, means the unit is invisible. This is pretty straightforward stuff. And this is the same kind of stuff we see in render unit. The render unit has a bunch of goober stuff going on that's like, is my unit swimming? And if the unit was swimming before, and it's not swimming now, then we take away, you know, we remove its swim animation tag. So it changes its animation tag. Now it doesn't have swim. Now it doesn't have ripples behind it. And if it's swimming now and it wasn't swimming before, then we add the swim tag, it's swimming. And so, I mean, basically my thought is, in a similar way, is the unit invisible or is it not, right? And that's sort of the absolute concept of, is it invisible? So if I want to just do a sort of short-term implementation of this, if first off, similar to swimming, we need to know if the unit is invisible now, you know, and that's so Boolean invisible equals simulation unit. I guess it has a lot of this on it. It used to get added by the auto thing. All right, if visible levels is greater than 0. Now I think it probably would be more performant to just say not 0. I think I heard that in the computer that runs a few nanoseconds faster than greater than, but you know what, actually we don't care. So we're going to use greater than, because negative numbers are broken, don't use them. But if it was invisible, that allows us to say, similar to swimming, similar to work animations, you know, similar to these other things, if invisible and not the invisible state. So if the state of invisible of the game logic has changed away from the render engine, then we need to turn invisible instantly. Okay, and this is like we've succeeded at your thing, right? And so otherwise, if we are not invisible, but this needed a not on it. If the new value is that we're not invisible, but previously we were invisible, then we want to show instantly, right? And so, what is this upset about? Invisible and this not invisible. Why is that? Is this typoed? Is this typoed? No, it's not invisible, and it's invisible. I'm totally spacing. Oh, okay, there we go. Elsif, sorry, it's getting a little late. Cool. So that makes it appear instantly. So you could imagine a really straightforward thing that it was already doing is basically setting the alpha here. And so I think one of the problems we had with the whole multiply concept was this idea that the unit already had a base sort of alpha on it, that there is fundamentally some concept of what is the unit's like current alpha that was set. And if you set vertex coloring, can you set an alpha, and does that alpha stick with you? I don't know who's calling this, but you know, sure, it makes some decent sense. So change unit vertex color exists, I guess, and it can do that. And you know, who's calling this? Maybe the ability builder, all those things we just looked at. Okay, sure. So you have this ability that you can set and unset your current color. I think that seems totally logical. That seems fine. But what that means, if we're tracking the current color, is that now the render system is tracking the color of a unit as specified by the user, and we're tracking that independent of the color of the unit in basically the okay, this is confusing. It's not really the render system, but there is a system that was written for the viewing of models. You know, the same packages of code that have the four-dimensional matrix multiplications for the arms of a unit, you know, as it moves around and all of that. Like that world, which was 99% almost a direct copy of Ghost Wolf into a different language. It was like a model viewer for many models in an instanced way, and we just use that to preview models and use that as our system that displays our game. That system has a color already on models. That is quite literally what color are we going to see on the screen. And I think it actually makes sense. You can have a sort of a current color here that would probably be the one set by triggers, for example. If you have a trigger that sets a unit to be transparent, when that unit goes invisible and back and invisible and back, he should remain transparent independent of the invisibility transparency. So basically what I'm saying is that the invisible state, as I see it from the standpoint of what I call render unit, which is just your unit handler, but it's the one that updates 144 times a second, you know, every time your screen updates. That one is going to say, conceptually, what we want to pass to the actual system. So basically, like when this thing sets instance vertex color, right, instead of directly setting that, we probably want to say get final alpha or something like that. Oh, what is this doing? Don't do that. No, I was just going to try to move this up. And it would be nice if I could do it in a way that didn't allocate memory, but didn't, you know, heap memory. So I'm setting vertex color on this model instance. It would be really good to do that where I'm setting, like, not just setting vertex color, but like setting it in a way that I guess all of these are doing instance set vertex color, and so I'm a little bit curious. Does anybody else do that? Yeah, okay, we do it on startup. So this is already broken. This is already broken, okay? So it's called once already on when we create the unit. And what that's doing is loading the world editor values. And I think that this notion of a value that is stored, that we're gonna recover to when somebody stops mucking about, I think that is something that should be set also by the world editor value. I feel like that's probably the same. Basically, that current color equals this thing, and then set vertex color on the current color becomes quite reasonable. I would tend towards doing the same here, because is this a thing? This honors 3 component value. That's, what is that? Why are we doing that? Wait. It actually does copy the length of the incoming vector. Okay, sure. I mean, I guess, but why? So if we want to sort of like reduce things and like sort of unify things to have less change, less to maintain, it's kind of what I'm picturing. then I would think that making this only send 3 components over probably doesn't matter, because we can just have a universal way of knowing what we think the alpha should be on that unit. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get to. So setting the current color to RGB1 over here seems like the end result is the same that we would be setting current color as the thing. What? That didn't do what I wanted. Wait. Delete this, pass this one up, and use current color is what we're setting. Okay, and then we do that here. You know, set current color equal whatever. And so I guess, you know, this one was trying to do that same thing with the color variable, but if I make all of these the same, such that everybody is doing set unit vertex color to current color, then I can refactor that idea that, oh, we set the current color, so now we're going to update the instance to basically be like update color, you know. That didn't normally do what I wanted. Wait a minute. We not get other instances of the same thing? Update color instance, set vertex color, current color. Okay. Alright. I see what this is. Instance. So the code I copied from the JavaScript, I don't even know if Java needs to do this, but the code I copied from the JavaScript was trying to get the instance to do the thing. I mean, oh no, it's actually more broken than what I'm saying. Okay. So dumb. Okay, this is dumb. The idea that row non-nullness is somehow only set at the end, and this is dumb. But anyway, setting. I'm trying to have this as a consistent notion of update color. Okay, so we have this consistent notion of update color, and all of them are doing it. And the key that I'm picturing in update color is, what if the thing that we pass along, like, did we not? See, all of these things are heap allocations. I've had other people tell me, well, you shouldn't care about heap allocations. You know, performance doesn't matter. This is the future. Computers run on magic. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. But I want to believe that it is at least conceivable that they might be wrong. And so I'm going to just have RGB. And this is a Java problem. You know, if you were writing in C++, there's no difference, because you can use a heap. You can use a struct that you've defined on the stack and not on the heap. And on Java, you can only use heap structures or a bunch of primitives. So that's kind of dumb, but I'm going to go with it anyway right now. So what that means is that I can copy this, put it here, update the API on the actual model instance, because why not, okay? And that means we can just set a model instance based on a known RGBA. And what that means is that update color can actually say, what is the final alpha that we want to see? And the final alpha that we want to see, you know, maybe that isn't what we think it is. You know, that essentially originally, you know, like what we were doing before is that this is like current color 0 and current color 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But not 4, by the way, just 1, 2, 3. Essentially, I am trying to make the case that if I were to do this, the 3 value here is now final alpha, and final alpha won't stay as the 3 value. It'll become more complicated. You know that essentially, if we're fading, then we're going to fade, and otherwise we're not. And pretty much, if this dot invisible, then final alpha equals is multiplied by 0.5, right? It's like halved, and that only happens once. You know, we're never going to double 0.5 because we're only 0.5ing what does the world see. We're not 0.5ing what do we think is the state of the unit. But this is where I'm also going to say, what if we're not invisible? What if we're fading with a fade timer? And again, this doesn't handle fading in. This is just else if unit dot simulation unit get fade timer. Again, using this thing that we've added, this idea. And now I've ruined everything by making this dependent upon the remaining time requires the simulation to understand, which sucks. Surely we do not have that, although we may have some silly way to obtain it. I guess I start to think maybe it doesn't matter. So you can get that inside the callbacks. We have it. My idea was pretty much that I wouldn't store it as a state variable. So the something like update animations can get it, but something like these setters have a much harder time. Although I don't know who's calling this. Probably the only people calling this actually have access to it anyway. So we could conceivably just say for now that we're just going to pass it through. And maybe that's dumb, maybe later on you don't want to do that, but right now I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to say that in order to update the color, we might touch the fade timer. In order to touch the fade timer, we want to be able to know what is like the amount that you fade out, fading out to a full 0.5 at the end. The amount is based on the elapsed as a ratio of the total, and so that, but really is running, I guess, would be like if the fade timer is running, and also if the fade timer is non-null is probably what I meant to check. So I was actually getting ahead of myself here a little bit, right? But okay, so if the fade timer is not null and the fade timer is running, what do we want to do? We want to say, all right, fade amount or something like that, is the thing I was just thinking about. That is get elapsed, get fade timer elapsed time as a ratio of the expected time for it to take, which again is really making it seem like if I was going to be really smart, I would probably turn the fade timer into a local variable, because why not? Suddenly this code might become a lot simpler to read, that we're just like, oh, fade timer. If fade timer exists and if it's running, we figure out our fade amount. What is that? It's a number that runs from 0 to 1, 1 being totally faded and 0 being not faded at all. And then I guess alpha is actually the inverse of that, so that's kind of broken. So we're going to multiply by 1.0 if nothing happened. We're going to multiply by 0.5 if the whole thing has happened. So maybe I should look at it from the standpoint of remaining. I was wrong about that. And this remaining over this thing should actually be multiplied. So that's fade amount, but basically final alpha, like what we're actually multiplying final alpha by, is essentially fade amount times 0.5 plus 0.5. And so this creates this fading, but the fade amount, the remaining time on the timer, is essentially computed as a function of the world. And so this idea would be sound if the remaining function were willing to give us very good resolution, which it cannot. So this is the other problem with my idea, which is that the idea here is actually entirely wrong. I've created a situation that's almost what I want, but not, because the resolution of the timer is wrong, and so we want our own resolution. We actually want an interpolation between the values of the timer, which is kind of stupid. There probably ought to be a generalized way to solve that problem, to basically say that the amount that we fade would be based on that. And I guess in other news, the hiding and showing of invisible over here I think is something that should pretty much be handled by update color map.simulation. So we do that. I'm going to say else if simulation unit get fade timer is not null and simulation unit fade timer is running, then update color. So we're really close, but I guess the color is not correct because we want to find not the elapsed time from the C simulation, which is stupid. It is at a bad resolution, but actually the elapsed time from the viewer world, which is at local computer screen resolution of, your 140 hertz means 140 updates per second in your clock. And how do we do that? That's interesting. To really do that, I think we want to just look at the game loop and think about there should probably be a function that could know that. So ultimately I should write something for any given timer. This would be a nice update to Warsmash, really, is that similar to timer get remaining, to have like high resolution get remaining that just says in the view world, in the 3D, what does that remaining time look like, even if it's interpolating between the ticks, just as a seconds value. And I think that's fairly straightforward to do that. So in the update logic of the map viewer, the whole concept of simulation turn ticks is based on when simulation update is called. And when simulation update has not yet been called, then update time is incremented based on until it reaches simulation step time. So what we really need to do is take this update time value from War3 map viewer, from the rendering world, and apply it. And I think that should be fairly straightforward to do. So it's like I want a function of the rendering world that is get remaining of a C timer. And what that does is it's almost the same as the remaining time of the timer against the simulation that's known to the render world. And then you get back to, in a really good design, the render universe here would not know about the simulation, right? There's a kind of circular weirdness there. But in this it does. In this one, the simulation is the everything class, and it's encapsulating, or excuse me, the viewer render world is the everything class, and it's encapsulating the simulation. And that's why I can't easily make a world editor on Warsmash, because that was done wrong. But maybe I'll fix it later. For now, I haven't. For now, all we should have to do, I would think, when you think about timer remaining as being literally like timeout time minus elapsed, and elapsed is literally like the ticks that have gone by multiplied by simulation step time. So simulation step time is in seconds. So this is like timer get remaining seconds for render, I should call this, because it's probably really important that somebody doesn't use this function for multiplayer, because you know how people are. Someday someone will, and they'll be like, that's the high resolution one, so I should expose it to JAS and make my great JAS ability. Let's not do that. But I think if we just add update time, essentially that's the missing component that says what is the fractional portion, the sub-second time that has elapsed, encroaching on the next update tick after the current timer value. And I think that should work. So where that could conceivably fail, I guess, would be, do we update and render, or do we render and update? And if we update and render, you could start to fall behind. I think that update was called in sort of update and render type of thing. So like by the time that we are calling Let's find out if I'm right about this. I'm wrong about this. So update animations on the widgets has fallen behind of update time. So the other thing that you would want to do to make what I'm doing make sense is to actually update the update time that has elapsed prior to touching the world of render widgets, which is like destructibles, units, items, so that when they ask the question of how much time has passed, they incorporate this delta time, a small fractional higher resolution time between render frames. So that seems pretty good, to just sort of move that to happen first. And that means that when we're updating animations and primarily in unit, that when we're going invisible or visible in and out, and then we're like, oh, I need to update, or maybe my fade timer is running, so I'm going to update the fading too. And that's redundant right now that I checked that twice, but I think it's fine, and it means that if you call these set vertex coloring functions, they don't fundamentally interrupt what's happening there. All of this starts to make sense as long as instead of C simulation here, if we just say war3 map viewer map or whatever, it's sort of this everything class from the render world, and we put that instead of simulation, and that is going to allow us to ask for that final bit of like what's really going on here, I believe, which also happens to conveniently contain the simulation within it, and so other things that we were already doing would continue to work, but map get remaining for render. So yeah, fade timer. Okay. Am I wrong about this? Wait a minute. So the remaining time. I am entirely wrong about this. So it is actually, unlike remaining seconds, there should be get elapsed seconds for render, which is similar to get elapsed that exists on the timer, and is the elapsed time that includes the update time. Timer get remaining, which then just says timeout time minus elapsed, and basically, I guess this is a little bit wonk, but if I was being really smart, I would probably say, does it have get elapsed tick? It doesn't. So in terms of the elapsed, like when a timer updates, like when we look at elapsed never passes a certain amount, but I suppose we could have the time for render incorrectly appear to surpass the timeout time. So elapsed needs to cap itself is the better of the elapsed time of the timer plus the sub-second sub game logic tick updating, or wait, why is that a max? That's weird. I would have thought that was a min. Shouldn't this be a min? Like, is this just like wrong? Surely the reason it would have been to cap it. Am I thinking of this the wrong way? The time elapsed. There's just no way this should be a max. It should be a min, right? I mean, is this broken? Like Warsmashed is just broken. Like the elapsed time, like you're ticking forward. You don't know exactly how long you've ticked forward, but you can figure out how long you've ticked forward, subtracted, like by subtracting where you are from where you were when you started, and then you say, okay, that amount of time has gone by. Or we also look at what is the total time we have to go by, and I say, okay, so the elapsed time should be like the minimum of those two. Like either it's your distance through the time, the elapsed time, or if you've gone past the end, then don't count the extra time. Just cap it. That should be a min. I don't understand why that's a max. I'm just gonna change it. I don't know. Who knows what that's gonna break. So the elapsed seconds for a render is similarly is saying the elapsed time of the timer plus that update time, but capped, again, minimum, against the timeout time of the timer, the overall time. So it's the elapsed time. And what that means is that the remaining time will never be, like, this creates a world where the remaining time is never negative, because you don't want that. That's dumb. So remaining time just stops at 0. And that means we can say timeout time minus elapsed time for timer, right? And so that's very similar to what the timer itself is doing, but now it's doing it with the sort of magical seconds time that's going to be high resolution and good. And that should let it be that render unit can use that high resolution and good time, which should be more accurate now, and get that where we want it. And so we suddenly have a high resolution fade, I would think, maybe. Now, where this goes wrong is this wants me to just pass the map world itself, and this one does too, and I don't know if this actually has access to it. Totally does. Awesome. Okay, so that has access, that has access, this had access, that's fine. Now we just gotta go in here, fix simulation render callbacker guy, just pass in this guy that he wants. Is that where it first? I put it in first. Okay, yeah. I could tell something was off. Just do that. And now I think we did it. So the other thing I didn't do that I probably should have thought about is there's two things that are invisible right now: wind walk and permanent visibility, and also ghost. Actually, no, get off of my face, Microsoft. I don't want to see you. I don't ever want to see you on my screen, Microsoft, like that. Okay, wind walk. So wind walk does the thing where it fades, and so you would think this would have a start timer. Did the timer start? No. All right. Okay, so when we actually activate wind walk, when we finish casting it, are we just immediately invisible? Create timer. Oh, right here. Create timer. Okay. It's literally storing the value as fade timer. Okay, sure. So, you know, this is a place where I should paste in what I was doing in general passives and say set unit fade timer with this kind of more fancy thing, and just plunk that into our Curo thing that we're like, oh, fade timer, last created timer, which is a timer that when it finishes adds the state mod buff, which I assume is the state mod of invisible. Yeah. Okay. So cool. And this is not very well formatted JSON, perhaps, but set unit fade timer, which, okay, so last created timer and casting unit. I think probably casting unit. Oh, maybe it's buffed unit. On add actions. Then actions. I think it should be buffed unit. Last created timer, it looks like. So that's the then action, that's the else actions. These are the then and the else, the add of the buff. Cool. Okay. I should switch to an IDE that has JSON editor built in, like maybe IntelliJ for this one, but I didn't. It's too late. All right, unit fade timer. So now I have unit fade timer, and that's pretty good. But buffed unit, last created timer. What this doesn't have is it doesn't do the thing where the what was I gonna say? Setting a fade timer. That's probably fine. Setting a fade timer there. I didn't set it on ghost. I don't know. I'm not even sure if Ghost used a timer. I kind of forget. You know, was it AGHO state mod buff, add state mod buff invisible immediately. You know, I'm not sure it ever actually does a timer. Maybe I just control F timer, and if it's out past Ghost, then we're done. Yeah, it is. It's on sphere. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that makes total sense. I think I just made a fade timer into the system, maybe. I don't know. You suppose that means my my nice little Orc Blade Master would just be able to fade? We're gonna find out. You know, we are gonna find out. What are the odds that things never work the first time? I don't know if you've ever done like development, but it's extremely unlikely that your software works the first time. So that's my guess, is that this is not going to work the first time. Oh, I was right. It's 3 out of bounds for length 3. Okay, who set current color to a 3-component vector? Wrong. Whoever did that is wrong. I imagine that's this one right here. Cool. Okay. Wrong. Alright, I'll fix it. I think I fixed it. It's the world editor tint was the problem. Cool. Awesome. Now a comma he didn't even turn invisible. Wrong. I did it wrong. I mean, he's probably invisible, and you just can't tell because I made invisible not show because I did it wrong. Look at that. Yep, null doesn't attack him. Confirmed. He is totally invisible. Oh, hey, look at that. He actually fades out. Is this a repeating timer? So I actually made him fade out, but then after he fades out, like from running away, like he doesn't, he just becomes fully filled again. That's interesting. I think I know why though. I think this is going to be a really easy fix in render unit. If you notice, this dot swimming equals swimming. You know what's missing? This dot invisible equals invisible. The concept that makes this whole idea work was missing. I don't know if you could see that one, but I think it made a lot of sense. Now I feel like we're going to have an invisible comma who fades, and I'm going to celebrate and feel good about myself because that seems pretty cool that we can do that. And you know, it's kind of a hack. You know, we could probably do better in the future, but for now, I think it seems pretty good. Yeah, so like here's a comma. Nope, I'm wrong. It's wrong. It didn't work. I don't know why it didn't work. We attack him, we fade out, and we spawn into totally visible again. Okay. It's kind of like nothing changed. That's interesting. If invisible state doesn't match previous invisible state, then we update color. Ah, right. Yes. So now it's stupid because update color is checking this dot invisible, which is not up. So basically, like color updated. Color needs update, and these are all going to say color needs update equals true. And then we only want to actually, like, if color needs update, sure, we can do swimming and working too. I don't think that matters. But if color needs update, we do. And then it's after we set the invisible state. It's kind of dumb, but it makes sense. It was a dumb bug for me to have, but I fixed it. But now we're gonna have good color state. Hopefully now it's gonna start the game with an invisible comma, if you know what I mean. I think it would be cool. I could be wrong, but I think it would be cool. Yeah, look at that invisible comma. He's freaking invisible. I go chop and I appear and then I fade away, and then when I finish fading he can't attack me. Oh, now I'm fading away. You can't get me. I faded away. Oh. I don't want to auto attack though, because my auto attacks make me show up. I guess that's why a comma has hide. That's pretty fancy. Look at that. I think that's alright. I think we're the winner. Winner chicken dinner. We did it. I'm fixing the code. I'm war smashing. But obviously this has the setback that it's not going to match the behavior when you combine invisibility and Night Elf Shadow Meld, but no one can tell because Night Elf Shadow Meld doesn't work yet. So why don't I just go play with a Blade Master? You know, I think playing with a Blade Master seems like a fun idea. I'm just kind of curious if the same code is working on Windwalk. It might not be. I mean, I'm not totally sure that set fade timer was in like the right place over there, but probably. We'll see. It's kind of a preliminary idea, you know. I mean, it's basically just showcasing the idea of your fading timer being in the render code. Now look at this one. We have a fog filter, dude. Fog filter. I don't know why those trees are not. Oh, dude, I broke it. I broke Destructibles. Why did I break Destructibles? What on earth did I do that would have broken Destructibles so that they don't fade based on line of sight? Since when? Since when Destructibles don't fade based on line of sight? They were solid black before. Somebody must have been mucking about with mask areas or partially visible setting, because I was previously not honoring it, and this is like acting like it's trying to honor it. It's like somebody's fighting over what it means for something to be faded. So, I mean, like, the real question, if we wanted to ask, is it broken or is it intentional, it would be to see, are the trees that I saw previously, no, they're not. Did I just break that, like, just now? Maybe I broke it just now. I don't know. That'd be interesting. Challenge for YouTube commenters to try to figure out, did I break the trees when I merged the branch? I mean, I've definitely played a version of Warsmashed where the trees out here were solid black, and to the credit of, you know, whoever, like, they shouldn't be, because masked areas or partially visible setting is turned on this map. But Warsmashed, as far as I knew, was not actually applying the masked areas or partially visible settings, so the correct display would be for these trees to be black. And it looks like right now they are not colored different for trees that I have Fog of War over from like previous vision, but I do have the area explored versus like never explored. So that's dumb. But let's build an altar. Back to our original idea, which was simply to look at a Blade Master. Let's see, have we implemented the concept of invisibility fade timer in our rewrite of the game? Hopefully. It would be fun. It's a fun thing. And then declare victory and take a break would be a good idea after that. It's always good to solve a problem and then run a test and know that you've solved it, you know, and then like be really confident that you solved that problem, and then just like celebrate like you did it, you know. So if we did it, this Blade Master should not only turn invisible when he casts Windwalk, he should actually fade from visible to invisible visually, smoothly, when he casts Windwalk. And that's what we're really looking for today. I always am, you know, working on the really important upgrades, obviously. You know, I'm so smart. I make the really important upgrades. Alright, here we go. Here goes. You guys ready for it? Will he fade out? Oh, he totally faded out. 100% he faded out, dude. That was great. That was a good fade. I think it's a success. Now, I don't know what's going on with the trees. Oh, but he didn't reappear. I wonder if that means I broke Windwalk. Because I probably messed with, like, the timers and stuff or something. I don't know. Like, failed to parse. I mean, obviously, they started attacking him when the buff expired. So, like, it's like I broke backstab damage or something. But I don't think that's anything to do with the fade timer. It's probably like maybe when I deleted the set alpha, like I might have deleted, you know, some kind of dangling curly brace or something. I'm not sure. That's interesting. Well, I'm definitely curious why the trees don't turn black. Render destructible, or basically render doodad. So render doodad had a pretty serious vertex color unexplored equals vertex color black. So who is setting that? Update fog. So the color equals fog based on the fog state color. Did someone change this? Yes. What was changed? New fog state get mask. I was just doing state. This is doing new fog state. What does that mean? What am I looking at? New fog state get mask. Get fog state. Get by mask. Okay, so there's 3 fog states. That makes sense. New fog state get mask. What the heck was the previous version doing then? If it was just state. Oh. Okay, so he's factored it to be smarter. Get fog state. Fog of war dot get state, which is now eliminated. There's a state byte. It's masked, visible, or fogged, and then the state byte. Fog state get mask, get by mask, get state. State, figure out get by mask. Just to figure that out. So where this fails ish, I think where this fails ish is that I was doing the weird thing where it was using interpolated state, and I don't think this is doing that. And so I don't know. I mean, you could ask the question, does that matter? But that's one thing. I was doing interpolated state. I don't think this is. Unless this has an interpolator in it. Color equals color times fog state color. Oh no, it totally has fade in there. Okay, so it has fade, so what the heck? That fog state color mask does not equal that. Okay, so now we're back to, I'm thinking, I don't understand why this changed. That if the state color starts at 0, but 0 is not the darkest, maybe 0 is the darkest. Did we just break the default? What's the default state color? Vertex color black. Yeah, okay. So apply color row. Oh, well, that's probably where we're going wrong. So the state masks are -128, 127, and 0. So if I stupidly set this to a 1, shouldn't this make the... I'm kind of just, you know, being curious here, but shouldn't that make the trees dark again like they're supposed to be? Because it'll do an update. It's kind of dumb, but maybe. I don't understand why I wouldn't have already done that, though. Like, I don't really know what changed that would have made that not what was happening before. But I imagine it's probably just some factor of the branch. Unfortunately, I'm on a map that has no trees. That's not helpful. So I should probably fix that one. Get just like a lot of trees, you know, just put like somewhere out here, just a lot of trees that we can go like check on. You know, did I somehow break trees? Which I don't think I did. I feel like something someone else was doing probably broke trees. What is that? That's something else. Okay, let's find out. I don't know who or if anything broke trees, but let's see if I can fix trees. Because now they have a weird state value that doesn't match anything, which means they should always update once on startup, which means that they should apply the value that actually matches to what it should have been, and that some block on, you know, is it different doesn't stop them from being where they should be. Oh, no. Okay, this is the weird one. So they are not getting the fog state that I sort of would have expected from that. Maybe someone changed this. No. Nope. I didn't change the fade function. Yeah, it's a little bit unclear to me then. Why is it that the fog state from the fog of war of the map would somehow differ from the fog state that we think that it should be? Because conceptually, oh shucks. No. Oh, I was gonna say that I thought maybe it's taking in index X and Y and mistaking them for floating point or something, but that's not it either. It's greater than 0, if it's less than 0, it's masked. What do we think it is? So actually 0 is visible, so it's not even what I thought, so the 1 is wrong, so that doesn't help, so that makes sense. But why would it be that they would start returning fogged and not masked, essentially? This idea that they would say we have a positive number instead of a negative number seems weird. Not like what you would expect. Get state, what is that getting now? So it gets the buffer at the location. So setting a state works, and then yeah, setting a state seems to work, and it's interesting to me that, I mean, you can walk around and explore and the trees light up, but somehow somebody broke them being dark. I don't understand what would have broken them being dark. I don't know if I did that. I might have done that. It wouldn't be the first time I did something like that, but why would... Is it the color? So... But the code change doesn't touch the color. The code change is strictly referring to something totally logical. And then we say that on state color 255 minus this thing divided by 255. I mean, that seems totally fine. What would it be? Why would trees count as fogged and not masked, as though we explored the entire map, even though we clearly did not? Envoy index X. There's space values, it probably didn't change anything. What index X, what is the cause of this regression? I'm just curious, you know? It's like, I'm about done. It's like I declared victory, but I don't really like if, you know, did me changing something cause a regression? I don't think so, but it's a little bit interesting to wonder. Suppose something did cause a regression, what was it? I don't know if there might be a world where the floating point coordinates are getting doubly floating pointed. But like, would someone do that? Is that a thing that we would have? I mean, it happened like once before, but I don't know. It's pretty unlikely that that would be a problem. Well, and we're literally drawing the pathing on the ground. So then you think, if the fog state were busted, it would be drawn on the ground. I mean, it seems like it's the doodads. It seems like fog state not equal new fog. Okay, so actually, that's where I'm going wrong. There we go. That is where I'm going wrong. Maybe the fog state is masked, and so if it changes, you rewrite it. But then you're back to, I mean, it doesn't matter. The state color doesn't check that. That almost just doesn't even matter. So they start masked, so it doesn't update, but it doesn't matter that it updates because get fog state should still return masked. I mean, what if I do something dumb, right? And I just say that, like, okay, so this is always masked. So if they're always masked, are they going to turn black like they used to? You know, what's the question here? If they do not, are we back to where did me introducing a function to change the color in the render stuff somehow muck that up? I mean, it doesn't seem like you would expect or want that, but maybe. Okay, so even if they're set to mask, it doesn't matter. What if we set them to masked and then... No, yeah. Okay, so if it's masked, then it checks that color against the color value, which is starting at 0, but the amount of masking is 255 to make them invisible, to make them black. So they should, in theory, start up the game and think, oh, I need to change my coloring, and then change the coloring over here. Did someone change this? I mean, I didn't change that. I added this other function, but I don't think we would necessarily be using it. RGBA. What the heck? What am I looking at here? So... vertex color base. It's a 3-component color thing. Okay. What does apply color do? So apply color sets vertex color to this 3-component value. That all seems pretty logical. Yeah, so what I'm not really following here is why would updating this, like if I change vertex color heap to vertex color black, like that's going to turn all the trees black, right? That fundamentally wouldn't we say that the trees are black, therefore they turn black? How would that not be? Then we're back to fog state's broken, except that doesn't make sense either. Okay, that's the best thing I've seen in a while. So trees that are black are black. You can see the little tips of the trees up there, they are black. So that is not the problem. Vertex color heap is the problem. Vertex color heap starts with vertex color base, which is using some numbers. And then it's applying fog state color to it. 255 minus the thing over 255. So when was this change? Okay, I was looking at calendar for a second there. It was last year's date. I thought it was in the future. It was this year, but it's not. It's last year. Okay, sure. So last year I changed this to fade. That makes sense. But why would the color not compute as black? I mean, in order for it to not compute as black, this has to not be 255. In order for this not to be 255, get mask of the masked state has to not be what you think it is. And that is strange. It seems quite strange, right? So it's as though negative 128 byte has rolled over to 0, and don't we know that that should be impossible? Negative 128 should be a valid byte. So why is that doing that? The masked would treat it as though negative 128 is somehow not negative 128. You know, I mean, what are we looking at there? So the integer negative 128, is it different than the byte negative 128? Okay, wait a minute. Picture that in your mind. So the byte negative 128 is FF, right? Wrong, FF is negative 1. Oh, that's where we did it. Okay. So it's because my system is stupid and we confused, again, the original Warsmash. Anybody watching this, I would challenge you to understand what just happened, and I bet you don't. So the byte range in Java is from negative 128 to 127, and I'm trying to pretend that the byte is an unsigned value, and it's not in Java. Fundamentally, it's always interpreted as negative, but when I converted to an integer, I was using bit masking so that I treat it as though it was actually ranging from 0 to 255. In that system, 255, the fully masked value, is actually what a Java byte refers to as negative 1 in terms of the actual bits. It's literally like 0xFF would be another way. So like if I change this, and if I put 0xFF in here, right, it's like in an unsigned world, that's 255. But in a signed world, it's not negative 128. It's not the most negative number. It's negative 1. And so by me creating a system so complicated that you would have to know that in order to upgrade this, it caused the other contributor adding to Warsmash to typo it probably. So I think one would say, why did I make a system that is requiring that level of, you know, oh, don't mess this up kind of stuff? Great question. So it's probably my fault here, but I'm going to put negative 1. I think this is going to fix it. There we go. So negative 1, we got that. It says we gotta save that other file. Sure. Boop, 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 boop. So now all the trees are black. Cool. Okay, great. Now all the trees are black. Now, actually, you want to go back to render doodad at that point. Delete this hack that makes them all masked, and then, like, you know, actually let it work how you think it should. So I had that hack in there, but now it's gone. So now I should be able to explore the solid black trees and see them fade into being lit up. You know, again with a color fade there. Doop, 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 doop. Alright, oh man, I need you. Watch this, my dude's gonna walk over these trees and they're gonna light up from black. Oh, look at that, they're fading in, dude. The trees are fading in. We did it, we implemented fade. Awesome fade. Okay, great. So I fixed it. So it was just that typo, because I made that system so complicated. It was like turning a -128 when it should be -1. Cool. All right. Well, that's a good time. I'd say we win. We implemented fade, and we made a system that could probably be expanded on with the whole like get time for render that's actually accurate that you could use for other stuff, or like improving fade in the future or something like that. So that seems pretty cool. So yeah, I think that's a success, I would say. Moving technology forward. I'll probably go make a pull request at this or something on my own code. I don't know.